He missed her. The feeling penetrated every cell of his body, causing his thoughts to constantly return to her image. This behavior inevitably confused Karen. She felt the confusion growing inside her, and every step he took only increased her inner uncertainty and anxiety. The girl was very embarrassed, but still couldn't resist asking a question. She wanted to understand what he was doing here, despite how much awkwardness and confusion overwhelmed her. She had heard that the boy had become a holy king, and now, gathering her strength, she congratulated him, restrainedly, almost formally, hiding behind a calm voice a wave of emotion that she tried not to show. Now Carla is next to him. The guy came up and lifted her head, but his sudden gesture silenced her. He kissed her forehead gently, almost reverently, and in that touch there was more than 1,000 words. The initiative was all in his hands. He confidently reached forward and, without taking his eyes off her, slowly closed the door behind her, as if separating them from the rest of the world and making it clear that now everything depended only on the two of them. He held Karen tightly to himself, as if he was afraid to let her go, and with a slight smile on his lips, he said that just as she had once said, he had truly become a holy king. Holding her close and not letting her run away, he asked if she hadn't said that. The guy whispered in a commanding tone, recalling the past, that when he comes to power, the girl will serve under his command. The girl closed her eyes from such pressure from his side. Gathering all her strength, she tried to push him away, asking Eric to stop. Karen was confused. She didn't understand what this meant. But the boy was not going to back down. The teacher would not be able to run away from him forever. The girl didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She didn't understand why her student was behaving this way. The story of all this began many years ago, from those very days that were created by Karen's choice, 7 years ago. Karen Prime Mondrial arrived from Lihiana in Wellington, her whole body numb from the long journey. She is Countess Lihiana and the head of the administrative bureau, and she was painfully tired of rummaging through all these endless lists of nobility, names, titles, genealogies merged into one tedious mess in which all meaning was lost. She was looking for a specific person named Eric Rodriguez. She finally found him, or at least she thought she did at the time. The reason she came to distant Wellington was to find the next king of Lihiana. The place where the girl lives, Lihian, is a country ruled by Queen Sonetti, who is called a living deity. This transcendental entity, born from an angel and a demigod, found Karen's dissertation outstanding and appointed her to a government position. Thanks to this, with the support of Her Majesty and her wisdom, Karen solved Lihian's many problems. And as a result, at the age of 20, the girl received the title of Sage and the title of Countess. And then one day Her Highness expressed her decision. She no longer wanted to be queen, and let Karen bring her a successor. This order shocked her. The queen asked the girl if she knew why this country was perfect, to which she replied, "Because Her Majesty the Divine." Then the queen asked with a laugh if she knew what would become of this country without her. Lihian exists only because of the reign of Queen Sonetti. Lihian would fall without a queen. Everyone knew this, but she understood it especially clearly. And this thought frightened Karen very much. Frightened by its obviousness, by its inevitability, as if her fate were woven into Lihian's fate more firmly than she would like to admit. The queen said that she was tired of those who tried to solve every problem through her, and besides, her father left the throne when he turned 40. In 5 years, Jim will be the same age, so in those 5 years, Kren must create a new king. The next king must be greedy, cunning, and clever, someone who, once he has something in his hands, will not let a crumb slip away. The queen smiled slyly. The girl must do this, unless of course she wants to lose everything she has. Karen remembered her parents' words about how, instead of becoming the cardinal's concubine and supporting her younger brother, she chose a different path. Hearing those words, she broke with her family, and at the age of 14 she left her native land, full of bitterness. And she rose to the title of Count. There was no way she would let Lihian fall. She had to try. She had sworn to produce an heir within 5 years. The queen laughed. Sincerely, easily, without a shadow of mockery, she was truly pleased by such a direct and clear answer, in which there was neither fear nor pretense. So she answered enthusiastically, "But there is one thing. Several months have passed, and 99 candidates from the list have already been eliminated, leaving only the son of Grand Duke Ludwig. Although the Grand Duke renounced the throne, his son retained the right to inherit. Eric was the only hope." But the shout that one cannot go into the Grand Duke's estate and that the devil lives there confused Karen a little. She asked again if it was really the devil, to which the woman began to scream even louder. Because of this devil, the whole atmosphere in the estate became gloomy, and the Grand Duke himself went completely mad after his birth. Therefore, the girl cannot go there. Who knows what trouble awaits her there? But Karen remained completely indifferent. Only the dish she tried made her spit. The woman replied with a smile that it was Wellington's signature dish, black pudding, which is made from pig's blood. The Grand Duke, who is called the devil. The girl was sure that all this was nonsense until she found herself near the estate. The building looked more like an abandoned ruin than an estate. Even the door wasn't locked. The girl apologized to the emptiness and added that she had called, but no one answered. But suddenly, from the darkness, a voice came out, threateningly asking who dared to enter this mansion. A flock of bats flew towards her. She didn't expect that. But it turned out to be a childish trick, a prank with the help of a magical, light-refracting stone. She saw him. Before her stood the one whom the locals called the devil. But Karen reacted quickly and caught him by the robe that hid his face. She asked him who he was to be fooling around in the mansion of His Serene Highness the Grand Duke. But the boy, whom Karen had lifted from the floor, stuttered and confessed that he was the Grand Duke, but the girl did not believe him. Then he added that his father had died. Confused, she let go of him, dropping him to the floor. The hood with which the boy carefully hid his face fell off. Karen was looking at a pair of unusually bright blue eyes. This boy was Eric. She found him. The boy was very scared. His face and especially his eyes made the girl enchanted. He had a very sweet face, but the boy was scared that the girl knew his name. She apologized and introduced herself, saying that she was called Countess Mondriol. The boy was very surprised and asked why a person like her was here. But suddenly someone knocked from behind Karen, shouting at her not to touch their young master, but the boy asked Marcia to stop. He apologized for his nanny's rudeness and explained that she had done so because she was worried about him. The girl didn't know whether to laugh or cry because even as a child she had never been beaten with a broom. Eric asked Marcia not to do that again. But still, a ruler who knows how to ask forgiveness for the misdeeds of his subordinates is not so bad. He was very cute, especially his eyes. They really attract the eye. At the table, they decided to analyze the situation to prove that the Grand Duke, in order to protect Wellington, concealed the death of his father and pretended to be a demon. Eric revealed that he was only 15 and could not inherit the title until he came of age at 19. Karen thought that it was difficult for a child to come up with something like that, and it was quite bold. A boy born into a noble family but posing as a demon. Karen recalled her childhood, how she was forbidden to leave her room because she was dirty and might infect her sister. She remembered her mother's reproaches that Karen was greedy and should give up food to Carla, that she was unworthy of jewelry, as if those jewels symbolized something more than just glitter. That all the best should go to Carla. It was a betrayal by those who were supposed to care for her. The girl wondered if she had been like that at his age. She admitted to herself that for some reason she liked him. The method he chose for himself was bold but disastrous, because it would not be easy to restore his reputation later. But Marcia intervened, shouting that she had no idea how much the young master had suffered. The boy asked her to be quiet, but admitted that she was right and that he had no other choice. Karen asked him if there was any reason to defend Wellington so stubbornly, since in that case it would be just an empty title. Eric, putting on a serious face, replied that it was his, and he didn't want anyone to take it away. Karen realized that this boy was not as simple as he might seem at first glance. The girl beamed and said that she had an offer for him that he couldn't refuse. The boy was very surprised. He did not believe that there was another way to protect his place. She told him that Eric should hand over the government of Wellington to the viceroy and that he should go with her to the capital. He will become her student until he comes of age. Further events developed rapidly in order to take Grand Duke Eric to the capital as an apprentice. Many complex matters had to be resolved. But for Karen, there was nothing particularly difficult about it. The governor, who kept silent about the death of the Grand Duke and appropriated taxes from the lands, did not end up as expected. He was eliminated, quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a shadow disappearing into the night, leaving behind only emptiness. A competent and publicly pleasing subordinate has been appointed as the new manager. He promised to do his utmost and work diligently, sparing no effort, devoting every minute to his work, in order to justify the trust placed in him and prove that he was capable of handling the responsibility placed upon him. But the girl almost cried, asking how the Countess could do this to her. The dress, the makeup, and everything for this performance, although the Countess knows how she hates pretense. Karen didn't pay attention and told her to calm down and just say hello to Eric. She introduced the girl. This is the daughter of the Marquis of Somerset. She will manage the estate in place of the boy for 4 years. The girl's name was Maria, and she was very confused by everything that was happening. Eric asked the Countess if they were planning to go to the capital. His voice was calm, but his question was filled with impatience and a desire to understand the upcoming plans. She replied that to begin with, we needed to arrange one performance and a grand finale. In the city, Maria gave a speech about how her heart was torn with pain at the news of the death of His Serene Highness the Duke of Rodriguez. Moreover, the girl punished the acting lord who called the young Grand Duke, who was left alone, a demon and spread false rumors with the name Somerset. Today they are seeing off the Grand Duke to the capital for training. He was not a demon. Despite rumors and prejudices, he did not have the dark essence that many saw in him. When the performance was over, Karen told the boy that they had to go. The residents were shocked. They truly believed that the boy was a demon. In fact, his appearance was like that of an angel. The appearance of the angel, Grand Duke Eric. The whole crowd watched them. No one could take their surprised eyes off them. The boy admitted that he was still not sure whether it was the right decision to leave Wellington like this, but the girl, listening to him, for some reason remembered herself. She remembered how she called all her dissertations rubbish. Karen asked her teacher what fool would listen to hypotheses when a miracle was right before their eyes. These words greatly disappointed her teacher. He suggested that she leave this country. She had already done enough. This is a place where they do not appreciate her merits. They only destroy her. Karen replied to Eric that, firstly, he was handsome, and an attractive appearance was a huge advantage. The boy couldn't believe it, but the girl said that from an aesthetic point of view it was perfect, although not to her taste. This confused him. The unexpectedness and unpredictability of the situation made him feel lost, as if he had suddenly lost his footing. But Karen smiled kindly, a soft, warm smile that could dispel any awkwardness and give a feeling of support even in the most difficult moment. Trying to calm him down from his bad thoughts, she stroked his hair. He would definitely cope with everything. This is the Montreal mansion. This is where they will live, Karen invited the guests in. The girl greeted the teacher, but the old man only asked who she was. It was Teacher von Neumann. The girl mockingly asked if the old man had become demented. She added that she had a student, but the teacher only grumbled and couldn't believe it. She introduced Eric and ordered them to greet each other. The teacher looked with special attention at the boy, or rather at the one standing behind him. The old man asked who this lady was. He looked at Eric's nanny, Marcia, who also said hello, embarrassed. The teacher immediately became kinder and, clearing his throat, said that he too was very pleased to meet him. He took the woman away with him, saying that he would show her the estate. Karen was shocked why her teacher was behaving like this and thought it looked disgusting. The boy asked which of the other family members still lived on the estate, but the girl dryly replied that there were none. She added that her only family is her teacher and that will never change. The boy was very surprised by this and fell silent. Karen was informed that a room for Eric was already ready, so she ordered his things to be sorted out and explained to Marcia what needed to be done. Eric slept poorly that night. He had a terrible dream. He dreamed of someone who said that the boy did not understand anything, that his smile was so similar to the smile of his insignificant mother. Someone said that he should not have been born. Darkness enveloped him. Just as his father lost his crown because of him, so Eric will be abandoned. The boy woke up shaking with fear. His heart was pounding so hard that it seemed like it was about to burst out of his chest, and his eyes could not find peace in the darkness of the room. But Karen was there, calming him down, telling him that everything was fine and nothing terrible had happened. Eric hesitantly asked what the teacher was doing in his room, to which the girl replied that she had come to check on him sleeping and apologized for not having asked. The boy said that he dreamed of his late father. Karen thought that the boy didn't have the best relationship with the Grand Duke, which was probably why it bothered him so much. Eric looked very worried and lost. The girl suggested that in such a situation he needed to be calmed down. She had never babysat children before. She lightly stroked his head, trying to comfort him. Just her presence, the fact that there was someone next to him, was already a huge consolation. Karen suddenly felt like she was raising a child. It was awkward. As she was leaving, she said that starting tomorrow he would have a lot to learn and a lot of places to go, so he needed to go to bed quickly. Erich calmed down. Silence reigned inside, and he felt that he was getting much better. Waking up early in the morning, he rubbed his sleepy eyes. He slept peacefully for the rest of the night. He thought that the teacher had said that he would be busy from today onwards, so he needed to get ready quickly. He was about to leave his room when he almost bumped into a girl. She asked, smiling, if the boy had slept well. The boy remained silent, and Karen apologized for forgetting to knock and that she would be more careful in the future. She invited him to come with her. Eric exceeded all her expectations. He had a clear head and excellent learning ability. Teach him one thing and he comprehends 10. from basic etiquette, such as the manner of communicating with people and speech, to the quality and dignity that an aristocrat should possess, and even politics, economics, philosophy, social studies, mathematics, and art. He quickly understood even those areas that seemed difficult for his age. When Karen saw him immersed in studying until late at night, "I was remembering someone." She felt like she was seeing herself as a child, and her soul felt warmer. I wonder if Teacher Neumann felt the same way when he looked at the girl many years ago. These thoughts made her smile. A slight smile involuntarily appeared on her lips, filling her heart with warmth and quiet joy, despite all the difficulties around her. These thoughts truly warmed her heart, as if the inner cold was retreating, giving way to quiet agreement and hope. Looking at Erich, she thought that she could not have found a more worthy successor. The girl's insight and her choice turned out to be correct. He will definitely succeed in taking the place of the ruler. Time flew by very quickly and unnoticed. Moments followed one after another, like sand through fingers, leaving behind only a slight feeling of the past. Teacher Neumann made an offer to Marcia. Lunches and dinners together, as if there was no longer loneliness in this estate. Eric was growing up. Every day he became much happier than when they first met, as if experience and time had helped him find more confidence and joy within himself. And now 4 years have passed since Eric returned to the capital, years filled with changes, trials, and growth that have changed him forever. Winter had arrived in Lihiana, a cold wind whistling through the bare branches and the first snow covering the ground. This was also a time when the teacher's arthritis was particularly acute, and during this time, big changes have occurred. Marcia took care of her husband a lot, as she was very worried about his health. Their passionate love, which began with their wedding 6 months after they met, continues to this day. The girl was thinking that she should go and visit her student. To think that her teacher had fallen so passionately in love, no matter how much Karen looked, she could not stop being amazed. The girl wondered if there really was a person in the world who could change you so much. She again remembered her family, which seemed to lack love for her. Karen stood frozen at the door, her body frozen, her thoughts racing between fear and determination, preventing her from taking a single step forward or stepping back. She thought that perhaps this was fate, that invisible thread that connects people and events, leading them along a path that cannot be changed, even if you really want to. Having warned Eric that she was coming in, the girl opened the door. She wanted to tell him something, but the sight was so powerful and unexpected that the words stuck in her throat. Emotions overwhelmed her, making it impossible to utter a single word. Karen didn't expect to see Eric like this at all, more precisely, without an image. The guy, as if noticing nothing, calmly addressed her. His voice was soft and confident, although a tense atmosphere reigned around. But the girl flew out of his room, slamming the door. She, stuttering and embarrassed, apologized and asked if he heard the knock, to which Eric replied that he heard it, but apparently answered quietly. This is how Eric became an adult. He turned 19. Karen, entering the room again, said that it was time to go to work, but he still had not come out, so she came to call him. He, having answered that he was almost ready, turned to her and approached. The girl seemed not to notice how the guy's hand was reaching for her neck. She wondered when her student had managed to grow so much, and Eric, in a quiet, low tone, almost whispered in the girl's ear that her collar was uneven. She pulled back sharply and nervously added that she was so inattentive, but the guy just smiled. The girl was embarrassedly adjusting her collar, as if making sure it was in place, and the guy asked her to wait for him a little. Karen had a strange feeling that she couldn't believe that Eric was now looking out for her, and not the other way around. It's such a strange feeling, but he really has grown up and matured. They walked down the bright corridor, and Karen said that she couldn't believe that Eric had been working for her for 4 years. When she first brought him here, he was such a clueless child. Now that Eric has grown up, the day when he will become king is not so far away. He really grew up to be a handsome man. A guy approached them and asked the director for help, as he had encountered a problem while working on the budget. She, unsuspecting, went up to help the employee, while Eric kept his eyes on her. The girl asked him where the guy found the problem, to which he pointed. Karen, like a true strict director, sarcastically asked him if the guy thought that if he asked her, everything would resolve itself. But then Eric intervened in their conversation, saying that a similar incident happened last year. He added that if they refer to last year's documents on this issue, they will easily solve the problem. While he was saying this, the guy held the girl's hand so that no one would notice. She gave him a folder with documents. But on top of that, Eric looked at him as if his favorite toy had been taken away from him. But he suddenly switched gears, saying that the problem had been solved, so it was time for him and the teacher to go. The girl, trying to break free from the guy's strong arms, swore that, as Eric had said, next time he should do his research thoroughly before bringing it to the girl. She also quietly added that she appreciated him intervening, but that interrupting people was rude, to which the guy replied that it was such an easy task that he was at a loss. The boy looked at his teacher carefully, but he abruptly asked something that the teacher did not expect. He wanted to know if his teacher had ever been interested in romance because he had never seen her dating anyone. The girl replied that she simply felt that romance was a waste of time. There is probably no person who would want someone like her, and she added that she is not beautiful at all. After her words, the guy was speechless. He didn't expect her to answer like that. The girl continued to say that she was never the one who received such attention. It was always her sister. The guy complimented the girl by saying that his teacher was very handsome. He smiled and looked at her with trepidation. Eric repeated his words, but Karen laughed and said that there was no need to flatter her. She said that it was time for them to get to work. After all, at work she maintained the image of a serious boss. They managed to finish everything even before dawn. Tired after hard work, the guy suggested going to the market, since they still had a lot of time, to which the girl readily agreed. He added that he would then go get ready right away. He smiled and acted like a child, but they were interrupted. Her Majesty summoned the Countess. Karen and Eric walked as if they were going to be shot, with terrifyingly serious expressions on their faces. Breaking the prolonged silence, Karen addressed Her Majesty. The Queen invited them to sit down and said that she heard that they had adapted well to life in the capital. The girl could not understand why she called her so unexpectedly. The Queen added sharply, turning to the boy, that he had already mastered court etiquette and that he was thinking about officially entering the palace. She also added that there are rumors about the relationship between the cousin and the Countess. Karen almost choked on this news. Eric seemed to become saddened by her words, that there could be no relationship between them, because they were just close student and teacher. The Queen laughed, saying that she was well aware of the Countess's innocence, and added that Karen always amused her. But she added that she should not forget the real reason she had brought the Archduke. Karen already guessed why they had been called here so unexpectedly. As originally planned, the Queen intends to make the Archduke crown prince. These words shocked the guy. He was perplexed and tried to understand what it all meant, but he was even more confused by his teacher's reaction. She replied that she would prepare Eric to move into the palace as soon as possible. The words that Her Majesty was counting on her made her beam and smile. It was this reaction that made the guy doubt everything he knew all this time. When she came out, the girl was in high spirits, while the guy opposite her was nervously clenching his fists, and his face was completely sad. Karen babbled on about how she didn't think Her Majesty would be the first to mention it. She probably knew she hadn't told him yet. And then Eric couldn't stand it any longer, he asked, almost shouting that everything had been decided from the very beginning. He asked why the teacher didn't tell her about such an important thing right away. Does his opinion not matter and he just has to follow orders? He suddenly became the crown prince, and the teacher thought that he didn't even need to explain anything. Eric asked her what she would do if she said she didn't want to be king. She would probably find a new person and make him her apprentice. Because for a teacher, the Queen's order is much more important. Karen wanted to answer that this was not so, but she remembered Her Majesty's words 5 years ago. She didn't know if she could really say that it wasn't so. Then she desperately tried to maintain her position. If Eric hadn't lived up to the standards, she would have found someone else long ago. And Eric continued to say that he thought that the teacher chose him because he was special, but all this was just his delusion. They just needed someone who could become the crown prince. Karen wanted to argue that maybe it was like that at first, but not now. But Eric didn't let her finish, saying that there was no need to console him. The guy added that he already understood what kind of person he was in the eyes of his teacher. For some reason, right now she remembered that she had said exactly the same words to her teacher, that there is no need to console her or feel sorry for her. Karen remembered the terrible words that she had already realized what she was like in her parents' eyes. The girl wanted to talk to him, catch up, offered to go to the square, but the guy didn't listen. She didn't know what to do with it. The weather outside was good. Karen thought about eating one of these. Eric looked like an abandoned puppy, either pleading or irritating the girl with his sad face. She could no longer pretend to be happy. She didn't know that Eric could think that. In vain, she also plunged into old memories. She can't even say anything. But then her gaze was drawn to a cotton candy stall. Then she jumped up and walked up to the salesman, surprising the guy. He remembered that incident with the cotton candy. The boy recalled how the teacher first showed him such a sweet treat. Back then, as a child, he couldn't believe that this cloudy thing could be eaten. But the teacher forced him to try it, telling him not to refuse but to eat it, otherwise it would soon melt. When the girl asked if he liked it, the boy only replied that she was sweet. Then Karen added that he should remember this sweetness well and compare it with other tastes. This way, he will be able to find out what exactly he likes. He remembered how she smiled at him then. The boy often recalled that day later, and today, just like almost 5 years ago, she bought him this sweet again. Karen thought that he loved her very much as a child, but now he doesn't look very happy. She recalled his words about why the teacher chose him. These words sent a chill down her spine. Finally, Karen suggested sitting down and having a normal conversation. No one dared to start first. A suitable person was needed for the post of crown prince, so the girl brought him. The guy, completely saddened, replied that he knew. He replied that everything was fine now. Thanks to this, he was able to meet with the teacher. But the girl added in a serious tone that her choice was Eric. When she first saw him, she felt as if she were seeing her old self. In a child who has never known parental love and has been abandoned, but desperately trying to survive at any cost. Her younger sister was a really beautiful child. Wherever she went, she always monopolized everyone's love and attention, but with her, the situation was the opposite. That's why she studied hard from a young age, hoping that if she became smarter, her parents would at least once pay attention to her. But as if mocking her efforts, her sister even developed the qualities of a saint. And Karen's achievements were meaningless in the face of a miracle that appeared for the first time in 100 years. On top of that, she was also scolded for having to live for her little sister. She was told to be useful at least once. She would have started to think the same way if there hadn't been a teacher to guide her. Teacher von Neumann allowed her to show her talents. He was the only one who noticed her talents from childhood. The fact that she is alive now is also thanks to the teacher. And that's why she wanted to be that kind of teacher for Eric. To those who would see his value and guide him on the right path, each time she only assessed Eric, but never thought about what kind of teacher she was. The girl didn't know what to do if Eric became disillusioned with him and completely refused to become king. But the boy, taking the teacher by the hand, replied that she was exactly that kind of teacher for him. He too came into the world thanks to her, and these 4 years were truly happy. If it weren't for the teacher, he wouldn't have even known the sweetness of cotton candy. Karen was touched and thanked him for his words, and asked if perhaps she had taken a slight wrong turn. Initially, her goal was to raise Eric to be a king, but the older he got, the more she thought of him not as a student, but as family. She apologized for not telling him earlier, and if she were in his place, she would also have been very surprised and upset. The girl would still like him to become king, but if it is difficult for him, she may not do it. She will be proud of any choice he makes. She closed her eyes, waiting for an answer. Eric finally replied that the fact that she hadn't told him beforehand still hurt, but he added that it would be nice if she didn't have any more secrets from him. He stood up and added that since the teacher believed in him so much, he would not disappoint her. Let the teacher not worry about him. He promises that he will cope. There were still more than 2 weeks before he was due to leave for the palace, and he asked if there was a reason why the queen had called him so early. The queen looked at the young man thoughtfully, as if studying him with her eyes. He replied that she suddenly became curious whether he really didn't know that he would become the crown prince in the future. The boy remembered his childhood when he said that he didn't want to disappoint people, but it seemed that he couldn't cope alone. But she replied that in such moments it is important who is next to you. For example, people like her who support the queen are important. The boy was very surprised then, but asked if the teacher could stay with him further. The girl then laughed that nothing was impossible, but as the ruler of Wellington, it would be a little difficult to accomplish. Eric replied that he was overrated, even though he didn't know about the position of crown prince, but he knew that he wouldn't be able to take the place of the head of the family. Karen made the right choice, but it is still better for the king to have a strong desire. It will be interesting to see what kind of king he becomes. The peaceful days were drawing to an end, and the palace was in full swing, preparing for a banquet in honor of Eric's birthday and his move. People were debating whether to declare it a national holiday, even though Eric is not the queen's biological child, but she has no children, so he is first in line to the throne. Karen thought that they were all just talking. She, lost in thought, wanted to hand the papers to Eric, but he was not there. She completely forgot that he no longer worked with her. Someone started whispering that the director was also human and did not want to let his precious student go. She thought about how she had dragged Eric around with her for 4 years and forced him to work, and she was ashamed of it. Karen tried not to show it, but she missed him. Although it is a little bitter, these 4 years were only for this moment. Eric will become a good king, and she decided that she would leave. Eric will no longer rely on her if the newly minted king has his mentor next to him. It will certainly cause gossip. Leaving Eric, she will be able to do her research again, breathing in the smell of books. And for this, the girl needs to stop daydreaming and work. There are only 2 weeks left until the banquet. Finally, Karen returned to the townhouse and called for Eric, but she was met by Marcia. She stood and looked at the Countess with sad eyes. Karen asked, because she couldn't understand what Marcia was doing in Eric's room, and what was wrong with Eric's room itself. The nanny replied that the young gentleman had moved into the palace, to which Karen asked if he was supposed to leave in 2 weeks. Marcia replied that she herself didn't really know, but the young gentleman was in a hurry. The nanny suggested that Karen write him a letter, since the young gentleman was going into an unfamiliar environment. If the Countess sends him a letter, it will certainly support him. When he first arrived at Townhouse Montreal, he was plagued by nightmares. Karen recalled her life with him in this mansion with some sadness. She taught him how to write letters, and I even received a letter from him for practice, but she never wrote to him herself. The girl asked if he would be happy if he received a letter from her. Marcia beamed and replied that of course, and that she would get paper and a pen ready, and there was also a gift that the young gentleman had prepared for Karen, Eric's birthday and the celebration of moving into the palace. This banquet was planned to feature a large number of guests and dishes that were rare for Rihian. When Karen arrived at the banquet, the girls around her were whispering about whether the Countess realized that all eyes were on her, or if this was just a show because she was his guardian. The girl was wondering if the gift that Marcia was talking about was really a dress. The exit of the Queen and the Archduke was announced. All the guests bowed their heads as a sign of respect. Karen noticed that there was a brooch on the collar of Eric's suit, the very one that the girl gave him. She bought this brooch because she thought it would look good with Eric's outfit, and it also matched his eyes very well. It's still good that the girl sent it along with the letter. Karen looked at him, admiring how handsome he had grown. Eric saw the teacher among the crowd and was surprised that she was wearing a dress, but the Queen reprimanded him. She told the guy to watch his facial expression, but suddenly the young man's gaze was attracted by another person. The girl stood with her head held high and did not take her eyes off the guy. This made him feel embarrassed. The Queen thought that, in the end, she and the girl met eyes, but it was the king's job to sort this out. A king who cannot cope with one subject is nonsense. Her Majesty ordered the guests to all raise their heads. She thanked everyone who came to celebrate her nephew Eric's birthday. But before the banquet begins, she wants to announce that she had no heir, and she had been thinking about this problem for a long time. Therefore, the Queen decided to accept Archduke Eric as her adopted son and declared him crown prince of this country. Eric asked again, because there was no talk of becoming an adopted son, but the Queen ordered him to give her his hand. She put her ring on his finger. To put on the ring means to recognize him as the heir to the entire fortune. From now on, Eric is the future king. The hall was filled with words of congratulations and recognition of his glory, and Karen thought that her student had truly grown. Now that Eric's appointment as prince was official, her work must come to an end. She thought that, in fact, it was time to leave. But Eric came up almost right up to her and addressed her. He asked if she would do him the honor of dancing with him. The girl was extremely surprised. She certainly didn't expect this. She took the first dance of the future king. Karen asked him if he didn't know how important the first dance was in high society, to which he replied that he did. Then she asked why her. He, without paying attention, whispered that he received her gift. Eric began to bombard her with questions about the brooch, but the girl became very embarrassed. He came so close that Karen was taken aback. But the guy just laughed good-naturedly. Still, Eric grew up to be a very handsome young man. They whirled around in a dance, not paying attention to anyone around them. But they, and specifically Eric, were clearly being watched. She was sure that this was the young man she liked. She wants to accustom this precious prince to her foot and twist him as she pleases. But there is one obstacle to achieving her goals. The one who is dancing with him now irritates her too much. The music faded and the dance came to an end, but Karen turned to her student. She congratulated him on his birthday with a sincere smile, to which he replied that she should definitely congratulate him next year. She replied that, of course, but she was wondering if she would be with him next year. Karen headed for the exit, but someone's voice tore the future king from his thoughts. A female voice expressed joy at meeting him. Eric turned around. The girl introduced herself. Her name was Gina from Marquisate Pax, and asked if the guy would dance with her. This woman evoked strange feelings in him. She is the only daughter of the Marquis of Pax, one of the families of those aristocrats who have great influence in aristocratic society. There would be no harm in them becoming friends, Eric thought. He asked her to dance, and the girl grinned at the thought that he was even more handsome up close. The next dance partner has been announced, Lady Gina of Marquisate. Considering her background, it's not a bad choice. But a painfully strange feeling arose in Karen's heart, maybe because this is the first time she sees him with a girl his own age. She was surprised at how Eric beamed while dancing with her. Karen felt unwell, so she decided to leave. Erich noticed her absence. As if reading his thoughts, the girl asked if he and Countess Mandriel were close. He replied that she was his teacher, to which Jenna angrily replied that Karen was a commoner, an old and unpopular woman without any political support. Erich flared up and ordered in a rude tone to stop insulting his teacher. She wanted to answer that this was just a statement of fact, but Erich had already distanced himself from her. Unexpectedly, she smiled and said that the man was very cute when he was pouting. She approached him with the words that she had heard a lot about him, and especially about his unhappy childhood. She grabbed him sharply by the collar of his suit. Jenna pulled him towards her to kiss him, but Erich only flared up and asked what she was doing without giving in. Then the lady touched his suit with her lips. A bright lipstick mark remained on the fabric. Smiling and looking into his eyes, the lady asked if he would like to start dating her, but Erich cut him off. He refuses. As he turned to walk away, Jenna added that he would regret his refusal. But he didn't pay any attention to her. Lady Jaina was head over heels in love with him and wanted to have him as a pet. Gina Pax never let go of what she wanted. Rian's main industry is livestock farming, and those who owned the vast meadows enjoyed great wealth. Among them, the Pax family was one of the richest, and the only daughter of Marquis Pax, Jaina Pax, as the sole heir to this enormous fortune, bathed in the attention of men. Everyone courted her because of her background, but the men who came easily to her could not arouse her interest. But Erich is different. He has nothing but good looks, but what an arrogant character he has. She wants to get him at any cost. Whether he comes to her, if she takes something valuable from him, then that woman will be her first victim. Karen is very tired. After a day like that, she could just fall off her feet. She didn't complain to herself that she didn't understand how everyone managed to dance in such shoes. Today she received a letter, but the letter was particularly old. It was also from another country. Her hands began to shake slightly as she began to read. She couldn't believe her eyes. The letter stated that since Karen had not responded to other letters, this letter would be the last one. Her sister would soon arrive in Rian. It was a complete disaster for Karen. Carla was always the one who made Karen feel worthless. Karen always looked after her and protected her. But the younger one only claimed that Karen looked at the world with an evil heart. The girl who charmed people with a sparkle that Karen didn't have. This shine that turned her into a lump of inferiority complex. The girl hated remembering her childhood. That was the only thing she needed now. If she left as she wrote in the letter, then there is less than 6 months left. It was so long ago, but she feels like she is returning to childhood. Karen thought it would be better to concentrate on work, but suddenly an invitation to a hunting festival fell into her hands. The man reported that he would like them to hold the hunting festival again this year. The queen and the future king listened attentively to his speech. He seemed eager to show off his family's power, but Erich added that the event had been cancelled by the previous king. However, the royal family has had too few events recently, and this will also be a good opportunity for the crown prince to strengthen ties with other aristocrats. Erich wanted to object, but the queen interrupted him, saying that she was also a parent and wanted to show off the prince's skills. She also added that when she interferes, it looks like she is getting into children's fights, so she has refrained until now. But this time she is so interested in what magnificent booty the crown prince will bring back. This year they will hold a hunting festival. The man thanked them. Erich objected, to which the queen asked if he was weak in horse riding or fencing. But he replied that this was not the point at a major event that the queen would not be presiding over. There would be those who would try to find fault with him. The queen asked if Karen had taught him that a monarch should be perfect, to which Erich replied that no, and emphasized that the monarch does not need to do everything himself. A monarch is one who asserts his authority. Authority is fear caused by cruelty. It will be difficult and challenging for him to establish his authority now, but there is a way to keep in check those he doesn't like. The fact that he is the crown prince. So let him show off his beautiful, flower-like appearance. The queen added that Karen had taught him well, but she was a hopeless straight-A student, so she was weak in unusual situations. If he only does what Karen taught him, he won't survive, because not everything in the world happens according to the rules. Erich thanked her for the advice and said that he would leave the queen for a while. A servant came to the queen with news that urgently needed to be reported. He began to say that last night at the residence of Countess Mandriel. The killer has invaded. Everything happened as the queen had expected. She ordered that the countess be carefully guarded for some time. It wouldn't be hard to stop them from acting according to a predictable scenario, but she wouldn't be able to protect her forever, and Erich had better understand that sooner rather than later. Meanwhile, Gina was yelling at her servants, screaming how much money she had spent, but they couldn't kill one girl. In response to the fact that the security was stronger than they thought, she began to shout even louder that they did not have a private army in the house and that they were not even real aristocrats. The man then suggested that he might be better off getting rid of her at Lion's Palace. The lady continued to shout that the queen was not a fool, but that they were worthless. They had never met her personally, and that was why they said so. The queen is a true deity. When Gina came to the queen, she already knew her name. Her Majesty looked at her for a long time, as if reading her like an open book. She then told the girl not to smile so falsely, because she would not like her rotten nature for her appearance. Jenny then decided to leave as quickly as possible. Since then, she has found it unpleasant to meet the queen. She needs a place where she can carry out her business without her sight. Her father had just mentioned that there would be a hunting festival this time. She asked in a haughty tone if the servants knew what would happen if they failed to do their job this time too. Her mood changed dramatically. She was in anticipation. In anticipation of that very thing, the day when Eric will become hers. On the day of the hunting festival, Eric gave a speech dedicated to the warriors of Rian, that the time had come to test their virtues, patience, and courage. He solemnly announced the beginning of the hunting festival. Karen thought about how well Eric had read his speech and asked if it was true that the queen would not go. She, wrapped in a fur coat, replied that it was too cold outside and besides, Eric was doing well as is. Karen replied that the queen should rest then and she would go and inspect everything. Just as she was about to leave the room, she turned around because the queen called out to her. She looked at her attentively, even threateningly. The queen asked her if she should take a stronger and heavier sword, but after a pause, the woman simply laughed. That's why Karen didn't participate in outdoor events where force was required, but this time she was appointed as the organizer, so there was nothing to be done. As she left, she hoped that nothing terrible would happen today. The Highlands are the site of a 3-day hunting festival. The knight who brings back the largest amount of loot during this period becomes the winner. The ladies, wishing victory to the knight they support, tie a ribbon to the hilt of the sword. Thus, the number of tapes becomes a measure of popularity. Erich prepared his horse to set off on his journey. But Karen distracted him and called out to him, but he was very happy to see her. She praised him, saying that his speech was excellent. Eric replied with a smile that it was all thanks to her. But they were interrupted by a woman's sigh. It was Lady Pax, rushing towards the object of her adoration. She begged him to accept her ribbon too, and that she had almost been late while trying to overcome her embarrassment. Remembering what this person had done at the ball, the guy dryly ordered her to stay away from him. But she ignored his words and said that he could just call her Jenny. Karen watched this circus in silence. She thought Lady Pax was being quite persistent, but they had danced together, and since Eric had become a prince, it was only natural. But why then did it hurt her so much to watch it? When Karen wanted to leave, the prince noticed this and ran after her, leaving Janie alone. He was worried about Karen and asked if she was feeling well. Lady Pax was angry. Was it really because of an unattractive woman that he didn't even look in her direction? Still, it needs to be cleaned up. She nodded to the man, clearly thinking of something. He turned to the prince, apologizing. No one noticed the trick. He said that it would take quite a while for all the royal knights to arrive, and how about going up the mountain while they waited? Eric asked again why the mountain, to which he replied that why not take a walk? From there you can see a beautiful landscape. He asked Karen if she wanted to go and see it. Eric said that he would prepare everything then, and at that time, Lady Pax decided to leave. This time she will definitely succeed, and her confession will reach him. Even she herself thinks that this is the best love letter in the world. Eric had a strange feeling, but he replied that everything was fine. Finally, they set off. The weather was fine, but it was getting cloudy. Eric asked the teacher if she was tired, to which she laughed that if anyone was tired, it was the horse. The man in front just shouted that they would be there soon. It was faster than Karen thought. It started to rain, but the man in front said that the drops were light and suggested they move on. Eric kept asking about Karen's condition and whether she was cold, but Karen refused help because even his warm concern could be misinterpreted by his subordinates. And suddenly, their attention was drawn to a wonderful landscape. They came to the lake. This is the same lake that was formed after the lava eruption. She admired the scenery and asked Eric if it was really beautiful. He replied that it was indeed beautiful, but he was not looking at the lake at all. But the admiration was interrupted by a man. He wanted to ask the prince something, so he took him aside. Karen remained standing at a distance by the lake, as if trying to hide from the whole world, her gaze directed into the distance, where the water shimmered. Perhaps such beauty is due to the rain clouds. The landscape has become even more majestic. But suddenly an arrow interrupted her thoughts. A sharp sound pierced the silence, causing her heart to shudder and all thoughts to scatter, as if they were washed away by a sudden wave of danger. The weapon hit the horse's neck, and it stopped obeying, and the girl fell into the water. It all happened so quickly that the prince didn't even have time to react. Karen didn't understand what was happening and sank deeper and deeper into the water. She can't swim, and her heavy clothes restricted her movements. But suddenly she saw Eric, who dived after her. Just a little more, and he will be able to grab her hand. He was able to catch her. Once outside, the girl coughed out the water that had gotten into her lungs. But she no longer heard anything, and Eric's face began to blur. She woke up and couldn't understand where she was or what had happened. Eric stood over her, completely frightened, and asked if she had finally come to her senses. He explained that they were now in a cave in the mountains, and that the girl had lost consciousness. While the security guards held back the attackers, they were able to escape safely. He apologized that it was because of him that they got into this situation. But Karen thought that it was unlikely that the first arrow had been aimed exactly at her. If their target had been Eric, they would not have touched her. But it dawned on her, had she really been their target from the very beginning, the reason why she had been put in charge of the festival, and because of her, Eric had also ended up in danger. But Eric's voice pulled her out of her thoughts. He said that he was lucky to find his horse and they rode far away, but in the process he got lost. The guy found this cave and even made a fire. But when they reached the cave, he sent the horse away. And since it was raining, it would be difficult for the pursuit to track them down. Now all that remains is to wait here for help. Seeing the girl trembling, he told her to take off her clothes. This left the girl frozen with shock, but he explained that their clothes were wet and their body temperature continued to drop. This made sense, so the girl wanted to turn away so as not to embarrass and not to be embarrassed, but she didn't have time. Eric got rid of his clothes very quickly. Karen couldn't come to her senses and stop feeling embarrassed, and the guy asked if everything was okay. He asked her to undress. The girl's heart was beating so fast and hard that it seemed like it was about to burst out of her chest like a mad drum, reflecting the whole storm of emotions that overwhelmed her from within. It was raining outside, and they sat close to each other and watched the burning fire. Eric hugged his teacher by the shoulders. Still, when she doesn't look at him, it becomes less awkward. Eric asked the girl if she was cold, to which she replied that she was warmer than she had been. Awkward. Suddenly, he said in a quiet voice that there was a better way to warm up. Karen, unsuspecting, asked what kind of method this was. Suddenly, Eric took her by the shoulders and turned her towards him. The girl was completely embarrassed and asked him not to look at her like that because in her opinion he was skinny and ugly. But Eric simply hugged her tightly and added that this was not so, and she was the most beautiful person he had ever seen. Karen wondered if he had always had such broad shoulders, but there was something much more important. She asked him to move away a little because she felt awkward. The guy, very embarrassed, replied that they were snuggling so he couldn't do anything, but she replied that she knew because he was a man. It's not because of her, it's a natural reaction, and she shouldn't have said it at all, but she had to pretend she didn't notice. They were both very embarrassed, but no one wanted to move away. Eric suddenly asked if the teacher remembered. She looked closely into his eyes. When he first stood before the crowd, disheveled, she said, looking at him, that he was handsome and beautiful, like a sculpture. Then she also said that he was not her type, Eric recalled, thereby embarrassing the girl even more. Eric, getting as close to Karen as possible, asked whether he was now her type or not. The girl couldn't think straight. She was too close, too awkward. But he came closer, step by step, slowly but decisively, as if drawn by an invisible force that left her no choice. Karen didn't know how to react at all. Eric embarrassed her too much. He, with a pitiful face, only said that he was curious. The boy asked the teacher if she had ever thought about anything like that while looking at him, to which she did not even answer. Eric explained that he was asking if she ever wanted a relationship beyond student and teacher. Eric was so close that she was reflected in his pupils, and terrible thoughts were creeping into her head. Does he really feel something for her? A low voice croaked very close, asking to simply understand his feelings. Their lips almost touched each other, but someone's scream interrupted them. Thanks to one of the guards, who barely managed to escape and report the news, they were saved. More precisely, thanks to the fact that the Queen accurately indicated their location. For some reason, Karen had an unpleasant feeling in her soul, as if they were dancing to the Queen's tune. Eric wanted to start talking about that time, but alas. Karen immediately pulled away from him in embarrassment and said that they would talk about it some other time. She felt very awkward, and the guy could only follow her with his eyes. Eric already guessed who attacked them, but he wanted to hear confirmation from the Queen. The woman turned silently and looked at him without much interest or surprise, and replied that, of course. The Crown Prince lost his temper and started shouting at her, asking why she hadn't punished them then, and whether she had really known about the attack. But she only asked in response why she had to tell him about this, since she had already saved Karen countless times. Eric continued to shout that this was why this time too. The queen asked, looking at him carefully until when she should. If you don't think and find solutions yourself, someday it will be too late. She approached him and asked if Karen had conveyed to him what place he would occupy in the future. The boy remembered his teacher's words that when he entered the palace, everything would be completely different. A leader must be able to read ahead and foresee the future. He remembered how her eyes shone when she said that she believed in him and that he could handle everything. The queen said dryly that he had better change his attitude in future. If he wants to hold on to Karen before she leaves, those words hurt something inside the guy. He didn't know and didn't even guess that Karen would ever leave. His reaction raised many questions from the queen. She replied casually that it was not fitting for the new king to rely on anyone else. The woman added that Karen would make this choice for him, and she thought the same. Finally, she smiled and asked with a grin what was wrong with his face. Did he really think that Karen would be by his side forever? He seemed incredibly naive, as if he hadn't yet had time to face harsh reality and continued to believe that everything around him would be simpler and clearer than it actually was. Not to mention the people. Will Eric be able to protect even one of his people? He was furious. Anger burned in his eyes, his breathing quickened, and every movement betrayed tension. Karen couldn't leave him, couldn't abandon him. He never imagined that she would not be by his side. If you don't think and don't find solutions yourself, someday it will be too late to help. It's not too late because he won't let it happen. He swore this to himself. Karen lay in her bed after such a busy day. But sleep just wouldn't come. She was thinking that she needed to have a normal conversation because Eric was sometimes calmer than her. But she was in doubt. She recalled Eric's face and body, every feature, every look, every touch, as if her memories stubbornly played back before her what she was trying to repress. She remembered how they almost kissed, how the air between them became thick, how the silence stretched painfully long, and how one wrong step could have changed everything, crossing the line forever. The realization of what had almost happened confused her so much that she almost jumped out of bed. She and Eric, I would never have thought in my life that anything more than the usual conversations between a teacher and a student was possible between them. But a knock on the door in the middle of the night interrupted my train of thought. Karen couldn't even imagine who exactly would come to her at such a late hour. She had told the servants that she wanted to rest in silence, to close herself off from the world at least for the evening, to be alone with herself. But the girl quickly realized who was standing behind the door. She swung the door open, as if she had suddenly made a decision from which she could no longer retreat. Eric stood behind her, his face looking like he was about to burst into tears. He was completely dejected. Something was clearly bothering him. The guy looked at the girl with pitiful eyes, forcing her to either be touched or embarrassed. Karen was about to ask what had happened to him, but the guy silently laid his head on her shoulder. She, completely at a loss, tried to find out if her student was okay. Eric quietly replied that he had a dream. The girl asked again. She didn't fully understand what was happening. The guy looked straight into her eyes and added that it was a dream in which she disappeared. In the cave, he continued to wander, looking for her. The girl thought that he seemed calm, but Eric was still soft-hearted. How could she have decided to leave this child just a moment ago? The guy asked if she was really sure she wasn't hurt anywhere. He was very worried about her. But she didn't respond to his silent questioning gaze. She just calmly and reservedly told him to sit down, as if trying to keep the situation within bounds. Karen asked hopefully if he would like some warm tea to help him come to his senses, but he only quietly asked the girl to hug him, not demandingly, not reproachfully, but as if this simple gesture contained everything that he could not express in words. Without waiting for an answer, he hugged her first, saying that he needed warmth, her warmth, and that he was very scared. The girl knew that all this was a lie, which could be easily unraveled. She hugged him back, telling him to calm down and that she was there. But he, raising himself and looking into her eyes, firmly replied that he did not feel relief. Even being so close was not enough. Eric kissed her. Without even having time to pull away, the guy deepened the kiss, pressing the girl to himself. Karen can feel her mind slipping away. Her thoughts are jumbled, her breathing is ragged, and everything around her seems to lose focus, dissolving into sensations she can no longer control. She knows she should push him away. It's the only right thing to do, the only way to maintain control. But her body doesn't seem to obey, paralyzed by the internal struggle between reason and desire. That's definitely not right. She's his teacher, his mentor, the person he should follow as an example and not lose himself in his feelings. The guy's fingers slid freely over her body, exploring every curve and bend with easy confidence, as if drawing invisible patterns of passion and tenderness on her skin. She tried to push Eric away, feeling inside that it was wrong, although her hands were shaking and her heart was beating anxiously, mixing fear with a subtle desire. The girl tried to leave, saying that she didn't think this was a good idea. Eric is her student after all. But the guy touched her cheek with his hand and called her name. He said that the idea of this did not just arise today. He dreamed about it every day. She knows how afraid he is of losing her. This fear is hidden in his every look, in every uncertain step, and she feels it. But when the girl said that she would not disappear, he snapped that it was all a lie. He, completely dejected, asked that she leave for him, and that is indeed true. The guy asked her if she really thought he would do it for him. Karen admitted to herself that she had never thought about Eric's feelings. She touched his cheeks with both hands. Karen promised to be by his side until he ascended the throne and became a wise king. If he becomes a tyrant, she will scold him, asking if this is how she taught him. So he doesn't have to worry anymore. But the guy wasn't satisfied. He kissed her again. But Karen pulled away suddenly, as if awakening from a spell. He, with eyes full of pleading, like those of a poor abandoned puppy, quietly and almost in a whisper, asked if it was possible. If it was possible to stay, to touch, to be close at least a little longer. The girl was about to answer that no, it was wrong. The words almost escaped her lips, but something inside her trembled. But a voice inside her asked why she hesitated. She really didn't want to make him cry, so she kissed him first. The guy asked with a hint of hope in his voice if he could take this kiss as permission. The girl was very embarrassed and didn't know what to answer. Her cheeks were burning, her gaze darted around, and her heart was beating so loudly as if it was afraid that her silence would say more than any words. Instead of words, she pressed her lips to his and did not pull away. The guy was full of initiative. His confidence knew no bounds. He dominated her with every gesture, every glance, increasingly confusing her, embarrassing and subjugating her more and more. He swore that he would become anyone for her, even someone he never dreamed of being, just to see her smile and feel her next to him. If she wants him to be king, he will be. Rise from the ashes, take the throne, lead armies and conquer the world, just to make her wish come true. If she tells him to be a wise king, he will be one. Learn to listen, make difficult decisions, rule with prudence and justice if only to justify her faith in him. And Karen was completely embarrassed. She had never even thought about doing something like this. It's the same with him. They are both full of embarrassment and a desire to be close. She shouldn't have brought him here from Wellington. Eric is much more greedy and persistent than she thinks. He will not allow anything that has fallen into his hands to be taken away. It was all like a dream. When Karen woke up the next morning, she started cursing herself and calling herself crazy for not being able to say no. She is his teacher, and he is her student. Such a relationship is wrong. The girl should have answered firmly then, but now she reproaches herself. She already thought that maybe it was all a dream, but the memories were too vivid. Karen didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she saw Eric. It was all too awkward. She was already ready to start talking to him, but the guy left. He must have been busy with royal affairs, so he must have left in a hurry. I simply felt sorry for her after last night and decided not to wake her up. Jenny was beside herself with joy. She would never have thought that the prince would send her an invitation. Eric explained that he was late with the invitation. As she knows, an unpleasant incident occurred at the hunting festival. The girl replied that she had heard that the prince's teacher had gotten into a dangerous situation and almost died. The girl's words about whether the teacher was okay angered Eric even more. And Jenny just thought about how this woman came back alive. The crown prince said that the great queen of this country said that a powerful force needed someone to support it, and he has no doubt that the Pax family will be an excellent partner for the Rian kingdom. As the one who will inherit the throne after Queen Sonetti, the young man is interested in the intentions of Lady Jaina Pax, the sole heir of the Pax family. He knows that they are both one of a kind. To his words, the girl, blooming like a black orchid, replied that the Pax family, as always, would do everything possible for the prosperity of the kingdom. Eric replied that he was glad that her intentions coincided with his, but the girl interrupted him, saying that she also desired something as valuable as her precious loyalty. The prince asked with some interest what exactly the girl wanted. Jenny longed for the coveted red sun tiara with all her heart, and waited for a clear answer from the guy, whether he would give it to her or not. Eric didn't expect such a fee for their agreement, so he remained silent for a while, weighing the pros and cons. A cold male voice firmly uttered one word, of course. And Lady Pax was thinking with admiration about one thing. He had finally succumbed to his charms. In her hands is the real treasure of Rihian. This tiara, which is passed down only to the princess of the royal family, is finally in her hands. But for now, perhaps the reason why Eric is doing this to her is connected with the prince's teacher. But even then, the crown prince responded in a cold tone that even if it were true, nothing would change. She recalled with delight what his gaze had been like then. Cold, powerful, a real man, whom she would like to subjugate. Of course, this woman irritated her, but let the prince wait a little longer, and then Janie would definitely tame him. And rumors were already circulating in the city about a scandal involving Prince Eric and Lady Jaina Pax. People were talking about how they danced at the party and couldn't believe whether it was true or not. Was he finally going to join forces with the Pax family? She had received the tiara, meaning she was already a princess. The rumors were flying like hot cakes. It was impossible not to know about this sensation, because newspapers and conversations filled the city streets. And of course, this news reached her ear. Karen was at a meeting with Queen Sonati, another important conversation disguised as an ordinary tea party. The queen said she did not intend to raise the issue of a hunting competition. Karen wanted to be indignant, but the woman continued that it was because the prince had prepared a pretty good alternative. It's not difficult to identify who is behind the incident at the hunting competition, but there's no need to make a big deal out of it and make it clear to everyone that the prince's position is precarious. Something was needed that would demonstrate the strength of the prince's position. The queen said through laughter that nothing gives such a sense of stability as marriage to a member of noble family. These words made Karen feel sad, but she didn't show it. A storm was starting to form in the girl's head, but this was definitely not something she could show, neither to the queen nor to anyone else. Even if we put aside the assessment of Jaina Pax's personality, the Pax family will be a great support for the prince. Even if their relationship had been supported by Sonati's royal power until now, the queen continued to speak with cold seriousness. Once the prince ascends the throne, it will be more convenient to have them as allies rather than enemies. And Karen only thought about the fact that Eric would have such a reliable family. It was a joy. But even though she understood in her head that this would be right, her heart was whining and breaking. After that day, there was no news from Eric. If they ever met, the girl even rehearsed how she would greet him naturally, so that they don't feel awkward with each other, so that their relationship doesn't deteriorate. But the girl was definitely uneasy. She didn't even know how to name or describe this terrible feeling that had settled inside her. Did she really hope that she and Eric would have something special? No, she was simply hoping for something that couldn't even happen in her dreams. Queen Sonetti said nothing, but just looked at the girl silently. She knew perfectly well what was going on in her soul, and so she asked Karen what the Countess was going to do next. She was talking about the time after the royal power passed to Eric. The woman understood the Countess's intentions, and she too, as a boss, considered it a good idea. But on the other hand, it also means the loss of an excellent aunt who could have protected the prince's path. The Countess's fame made the girl's heart skip a beat. Was she really going to leave? But Karen couldn't forget their first night together. The memories were so deeply imprinted in her memory that now there was no escape from them. The words spoken that night that she would be by his side until he ascended the throne and became a wise ruler. If Eric becomes a tyrant, she will scold him and ask if this is what she taught him. The girl's thoughts were interrupted by the queen's words that since she could not answer right away, it meant that something was bothering her. Karen was about to object, but the woman interrupted her, saying that everything was fine. There is still time. This is the path that the Countess has chosen, so Karen must make the choice herself. The queen smiled and, as if expecting praise, asked if she was a good boss. But Karen's mind was filled with completely different memories of Queen Sonati's reign, and they weren't the sweetest. Karen, of course, replied that the queen was indeed a good boss, but the queen noticed that her answer was somewhat uncertain. Karen couldn't immediately say that she would leave, either because of fear or because she simply didn't have the strength to do so. She wondered why she had promised to be there then. These thoughts weighed on her so much that she hung her head and looked completely depressed. But the girl was tired of thinking about all this. The next time they met, she would just punch him from behind, and that would be it. She didn't expect that her wish would come true right now. It was so unexpected that Karen was scared. Eric stood in front of her, covering his face with his hand. The girl immediately rushed to him, apologizing and trying to find out if the guy was okay. But he was perfectly fine. Next time the Countess would be more careful with her wishes. Unexpectedly, the prince said that it was not important at all. Eric suddenly hugged Karen, saying that he missed her very much. Just a minute ago she was angry with him, but not now as she stood, captured in such desired embrace. She was about to hug him back, but stopped herself. She couldn't do that, otherwise she would fall under Eric's influence again. She pushed him away, almost screaming at the guy to stop. Eric was completely perplexed. Why was she pushing him away? Because he missed her so much, because they should be close after everything that happened between them. But Karen was hostile. She warned that they didn't have that kind of relationship. She was very angry with him. Finally, she was able to admit it to herself. But Eric reacted like a little boy, almost crying. He asked in a trembling voice that she was really going to pretend that nothing happened after that night with him. The girl flared up. She started screaming, "What night?" And that after that he didn't even contact her. But the guy calmly said that the teacher hadn't been in touch all this time. The girl didn't understand what he was talking about. Eric said he sent letters every day asking if he could visit her. But then the guy, putting on a martyr's expression, said that she was probably swamped with work and didn't even check her personal email. This was true. So Karen, trying to shake off the feeling of guilt, said that the guy could have sent the person, but he replied that he did not want to bother her or distract her from work. Karen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She covered her face with her hands in shame, not daring to say a word. The boy asked if his teacher had been mistaken about him all this time and thought that he was taking everything frivolously. Eric continued. Could this really be the kind of man he was in the girl's eyes? The guy didn't let up, but continued to interrogate her. Holding her lock of hair in his hand, he said that it was very offensive. They stood like that, he holding a strand of her hair in his hand with all tenderness, and she not daring to say a word. Karen didn't know if he was telling the truth, that he was offended, or if this was all to make the girl succumb to his charms again. Finally, Karen, embarrassed, said that she had understood everything wrong, that it was her mistake, and now she would probably go. But he stopped her, saying that he wanted to show her something. He said this with such a beaming smile, as if he hadn't been punched in the jaw a few moments ago. This is the first scientific journal written by Avocado Terrace, which is a national treasure and can only be read in the royal palace. Eric knew that Karen had always dreamed of seeing this book, and now she was delighted that a national treasure that not everyone gets to see lay right in front of her. The girl really wanted to read this book right now, so she asked if she could do so, to which Eric replied that of course. Karen thought that all scientists were ready to sell their souls to read this book, and she was allowed to look at what was written there. Her hand was already reaching out to her to finally see what the girl had dreamed of for so long, but her hand froze over the book. Eric didn't understand what was going on, so he asked Karen about it, but she didn't answer right away. Finally, gathering all her strength, she turned to the guy, saying that she was very pleased, but she would not be able to read this book. She expressed her concerns that she might continue to abuse his power, because it's always difficult only the first time, and then it will get easier. The girl was firm and confident in her intentions. She definitely couldn't act like that in the future. But Eric only replied that the teacher was too nice, and that he would also make sure that everyone could see that book. Karen was perplexed. Displaying such a valuable book for public viewing was dangerous for such a thing. Eric plans to use a magical video projector to allow anyone to see the contents of the book, which will reduce the extent of damage to the book, and this will be the first book he uses it on. Karen was delighted with his idea and asked him how he came up with it, to which the boy replied with a smile that his great teacher had said that there should be no inequality in education. He wanted to show her this book before it became public knowledge. But if you think about it, this might also seem like an abuse of power, so he'll be more careful next time. Therefore, he begged her to forgive him this time. The apologies turned into an unexpected kiss full of tenderness. Karen didn't even immediately understand what exactly had just happened again. She pushed him away, saying that this was not right. After all, Your Highness has a fiancé, and what he is doing now is treason. But Eric didn't understand at all what she was talking about, so he asked again if it was true that he had a fiancé. Karen didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she began to explain that she had heard that his fiancée was Gina Pax, and that Eric had even given her a tiara, but the prince only laughed. He gently touched her waist and asked in a quiet, confident voice if she was by any chance jealous of him. Karen tried hard to push Eric away from her, but it didn't work. Not hearing an answer, Eric asked seriously what then. She would like him to really be engaged. Trying to avoid the topic, the girl replied that it would be better for the prince to have a girl from a noble family by his side. But Eric wasn't asking about that. He was interested in what the teacher himself thought about it. Finally, she broke free from his tight grip. She replied that, of course. But Eric had already learned it over all these years together. His magnificent teacher did not know how to lie at all. He did give her a tiara, but there was no official announcement of the engagement. Karen, with obvious sadness in her voice, replied that sometimes the meaning we attach to things is very great, like the ring the queen put on the prince's finger. But Eric replied that he didn't care what meaning people attached to it. The girl, starting to get angry, replied that he was not in such a position that he could not ignore it. If he wanted to become king, then Eric had to be careful in every action. That his situation now and in the future is a burden that will only become heavier, and before he decides anything, he must think everything over, again and again. But that's not what she meant. That's not what the girl wanted to say. The words just came out of her mouth. Without answering all her words, Eric pulled the girl towards him and kissed her tenderly, as if comforting. This time Karen did not break free from his captivity. Either she couldn't, or she didn't want to. He missed her too. Everything that happened between them could not leave a trace in their hearts. The girl gave in to his pressure, his touches, which simultaneously excited and calmed her, as if all her fears and problems were left behind. The guy had complete power over her. He knew how Karen would react to certain of his actions. But Karen again tried to pull away. She asked him for a minute to calm down. Eric missed her all this time. Her sweet face, her voice, her hair, her touch. But the girl was worried that there were people outside and they could be heard. And besides, it was a library. The guy wasn't going to back down. He just suggested going somewhere else. He tried to reassure her that she had nothing more to worry about. The guy's persistence resulted in their clothes being on the floor. Karen obeyed him, even though she tried not to admit it to herself, because it couldn't be that the one she taught had such power over her. The girl knew that later she would blame herself again, but now she missed him too much. The memories haunted her. As expected, the girl blamed herself for falling for Eric's bait again. Moreover, they were in the royal library. Karen thought with slight irritation about why her heart melted so much just when she saw Eric, or maybe she actually liked faces like his. Because of some kind of oppressive guilt, she then felt as if she were a criminal leaving the palace. But the girl was worried about more than just that. She recalled Eric's words about him not having anything with Jenna Pax, and that there was no official engagement announcement. Karen clearly remembered his words about how this was not the kind of relationship the teacher was thinking about, and let him understand it correctly. The girl also blamed herself for the fact that she seemed to be a jealous lover. But they are not even lovers, and she doesn't even know what to call their relationship. This is usually what people do when they love each other. She had already begun to put the whole situation together into something more understandable. Eric loved her. But her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Marcia, who announced with a smile that today she had baked the cookies that the girl loved so much. To her surprise, Marcia suddenly asked if the Countess was in any pain anywhere, to which the girl merely laughed it off. Karen said that she saw His Highness the Prince today, and he asked her to say hello. And then the woman started asking a bunch of questions about Eric's health, well-being, nutrition, and that he shouldn't dress lightly, otherwise he'll catch a cold. He would, of course, be well looked after at the royal palace, but Marcia had been his nursemaid all those years, so her concern was only natural. Marcia began to talk about how quickly time flies. It seemed like only yesterday that the Countess visited Wellington for the first time, and also, although belatedly, she says thank you to her for everything. If it weren't for her, the young master left alone would never have left the duchy. Since Karen came to Riyan, young Master Eric has changed a lot. He learned a lot, was interested in different things, and most importantly, he finally smiled a lot, and all thanks to the Countess. Karen replied that if she had looked after him alone, it would have been much more difficult, but this became possible thanks to Marcia and the teacher, who were always her support. The woman was overcome with a wave of tender feelings, memories, and gratitude. Marcia added that this is why the young master respects her so much. But these words, instead of causing a warm feeling in the chest, shot like a cold arrow somewhere in the area of the heart. Karen realized that the feelings Eric had for her were closer to respect than love. Suddenly finding himself in a dangerous situation, he must have confused it with the attraction he felt for the first time. And the girl's feelings for Eric, she didn't know whether they could be called true love. Jenny Pax spoke with obvious indignation in her voice about how one could work in the office in such weather, to which the prince replied that the lady had come unannounced and that he had business to attend to. If she had no urgent business with him, then let them see each other another time. Jenny smiled ambiguously at his words and replied that, since your highness says so, then she also wants to do her own thing. The girl wanted to kiss him with all her passion, a kiss that was filled not so much with love as with power. But Eric stopped her. He said dryly, with some cruelty and coldness in his voice, that it would be difficult here. Jenny pretended as if nothing had happened and was about to leave, but the thought that this was happening to him and why he was behaving this way towards her did not give her any peace. Eric can't help but know what it means to receive a tiara. The mere thought that she couldn't just publish all those articles for nothing irritated her, and she couldn't help but leave traces of the fact that she took him everywhere with her. Everyone already thinks she's the next princess. At this rate, she would never tame him. She needed Eric to demand to touch him. He did not dare to dominate her. He did not dare to subject her to his power. Suddenly, she turned to His Highness. Jenny is a wonderful actress. With a calm and bright face, she asked the prince if he would like to organize a ball on behalf of His Highness. The girl added that he had never held a ball since arriving at the palace, and this would be an opportunity to show everyone the strong friendship between the royal family and the House of Pax. The guy repeated her words about a strong friendship, as if trying to convince himself of this. Pax continued to say that if it came to that, maybe they should invite all the aristocrats of the kingdom. Since the future king was throwing a ball, it had to be grand and magnificent. And at this ball she will stand next to Eric in a tiara. This was her cunning plan. The mere thought that the prince would invite her to dance at that ball brought the girl into complete delight. Finally, the prince, without much enthusiasm, replied that if you think about it, the lady's words were true. He smiled and said that they would do just that, grandly, solemnly, and magnificently. It will be the most dazzling day. There was a real hurricane in the countess's office. Someone was looking for a pen, someone for last year's budget. Documents and papers were everywhere. It was not at the best moment that Karen was informed about the ball organized by the prince. The man said that since this was the first ball organized by the prince, every effort was requested. Karen thought that, indeed, there had been no events organized by the royal family since the hunting festival, and besides, this was a good opportunity to demonstrate the close bond between the queen and Eric. The man also added something that left Karen stunned. Perhaps this time they want to officially introduce Lady Jenna Pax as the prince's future wife. It will be a ball where they probably plan to show that the rumors are true before announcing their engagement. Rumors are already circulating that the Marquis of Pax is preparing his daughter's wedding, and the queen did not deny this at a recent tea party, so soon the wedding will have to be prepared. Karen couldn't take it anymore, and slamming her fist on the table, shouted, "Enough!" She said with a terrifying coldness in her voice that nothing had been officially announced, and ordered everyone not to give in to rumors and to do their job conscientiously. Karen was furious. Even her order to finally bring her the estimate sounded like a devilish curse. Finally, the man left, but the girl was crushed, although she didn't show it. Her head was filled with thoughts that even if Eric didn't have any feelings for Jenna Pax, being a prince, there were situations that had to be dealt with. For example, marriage for the sake of state interests. Therefore, what happened last time should not happen again. To clear her head, Karen decided to go out into the fresh air. Queen Sonity heard about the ball and praised Eric for deciding to organize it himself. But the prince admitted that it was Lady Jenna Pax's proposal. The queen, after a pause, replied that her son must understand what kind of event it would be. If you don't come up with a way to do it yourself, you might be late to help. Looking at the prince with a grin, Queen Sonety added that she would still hand over the throne to him and leave. The Pax family is not an easy family to deal with, but they are a family that makes a great contribution to the Rian kingdom. Eric firmly stated that this was precisely why he had decided that the royal family should not make an enemy so easily, and therefore had decided to marry them. Turning to the queen, he recalled that she had once said that a monarch is one who asserts his authority, but authority is fear caused by cruelty, or one can achieve conditional loyalty through advantage. But in response to these words, the queen replied that in order to gain something, you have to lose something. This time must have been a lesson for the prince, although the woman thought that this was a completely unexpected choice. But the prince asked his mother if he had anything to lose by making this choice. Smiling smugly, he added that there was something he had forgotten to tell his mother. There is a matter for which he wishes to obtain Her Highness's permission. The place where Karen could truly be alone was the bookstore. It was among the endless bookshelves that she found peace. She thought there was no place like a bookstore when her head was in a mess. The memories of her last meeting with Eric just wouldn't leave her head, even though she tried to get rid of them. Karen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She seemed to be going crazy. She never thought she could think of such indecent things. She couldn't even read a line. She couldn't go on like this. She had to pull herself together. It was no good. What was the point of her thinking about him all day long? She tried to remind herself that she was a rational person, and that she had to support the prince more than anyone else for the sake of the Rihian kingdom. But bad thoughts still crept into her bright head and clouded her. If she couldn't, what else could she do for Eric? Having made sure that here too she would not be able to stop thinking about him, or at least clear her head, Karen, thinking that she could go eat something tasty, decided to leave. But someone blocked her path. Karen, taken aback, began to lose her balance and reflexively grabbed the shirt of the person who had caused her fall. The young man himself was very scared. Of course, this is not what you expect when you come to a bookstore. Karen recognized him. The girl couldn't believe her eyes. And the young stranger also recognized her. The guy's name was Paul. Even though their meeting was a joyful moment, they fell. Along with them, books from the bookshelves flew to the floor. How many years, how many winters, the last time they saw each other was about 5 years ago, when they finished school. Paul admitted that he thought so, whether it was Karen or not, and he laughed heartily. But their joyful conversation was interrupted by the store clerk. They were in too awkward a position, so with faces red with shame, they began to clean up all the mess. While cleaning, Karen suggested that they continue talking outside and eat something tasty. Paul smiled radiantly as he looked at Karen. He was clearly happy to meet his old friend. The young man remembered that the girl had previously said that she wanted to buy and treat him to something tasty. But he admitted that he never thought that this kind of snack would evoke nostalgia. Karen laughingly recalled that they often ate sandwiches like this when they were at university, when they were late for classes. Karen was curious to know what Paul was doing in Rihanna, as he had never visited since graduating. The guy replied that they said that if he didn't come to the scientific conference this year, the budget would be cut, so he came. Karen replied that she had heard that Paul had opened a research center in his home country and said that he was a great guy. The guy admitted that it's interesting, although when something doesn't work out, he can't sleep from despair. Doing what he loves and conducting research is fun. This was the future Karen dreamed of if she left her administrative job. Nights without sleep, immersed only in research. The life of a scientist expanding new worlds. If Karen had lived after leaving Rihian as she had planned. After a pause, the young man admitted that sometimes he misses the old days. He really enjoyed studying with his girlfriend at the university. Even when it was hard because of the mountain of assignments, it was fun. He often heard about Karen and the news that her student had become the crown prince. To this, the girl just laughed and replied that it just happened that way. He missed the girl, but the girl didn't hear and asked to repeat. A strange, too sudden gust of wind prevented the guy's words from being heard, but he had no intention of repeating them. The guy, trying to change the subject, suggested that they go have another sandwich, to which the girl happily agreed. That evening, Karen thought about everything Paul had said. A research center sounded really cool. The girl thought that she seemed to have decided to leave Rihian too thoughtlessly. It was not so easy to settle down again in a foreign land. But I don't want to return to my homeland either. But her homeland decided to go to her. Carla, her sister, was supposed to come. How long has it been since that letter arrived in which she spoke of her arrival in Rihian and why she was coming here at all? It was curious, but at the same time she didn't want to know. Now she needed to focus on work. You can think about this after the reception is successfully completed. You can think about Carl later and certainly about Eric. There were rumors going around the palace that the prince had personally arranged this ball, and it seemed he had gone to great lengths to make it happen. They say he made it so that both civil society organizations and students could attend upon request. Everyone was eagerly awaiting what steps His Highness the Prince would take in the future. Karen was elated in her heart. When she first received this offer, she was very worried about the reaction of the aristocrats. Eric is good at making his own way. When His Highness the Crown Prince and Lady Pax finally entered the hall, everyone gasped and could not take their eyes off it. They were a truly beautiful couple. Both young, handsome, and stately, exactly the kind of people one would expect to see at the head of a kingdom. But Karen felt depressed. She already wanted to leave this event, but the girl bumped into someone again. The man asked if she was okay, and the girl's eyes immediately lit up. People had been whispering that Lady Pax was wearing that very tiara, and it looked like those rumors were true. That's why Marcus Pax had been putting on such airs lately. The Pax family is unrivaled in wealth, and this can only benefit the royal family. The prince now has a reliable patron. All these conversations and more filled the hall. In any case, everyone around was sure that she would become the crown princess. And that realization brought a smile to Jenna Pax's face. That's right. Even if Eric is still breaking down, he won't be able to help but desire her. Eric turned to the girl, saying that he would like to formally settle their relationship with her at this ball, and wanted to ask what the lady thought about it. The girl replied with a smile that the Pax family would be loyal subjects of Rihian and would obey any of his orders. But still, Eric replied with a smile that he really liked the girl's unwavering faith. Finally, he became hers. Now she has complete power over him. The prince made an announcement thanking everyone who took time out of their busy schedules to attend the event. He especially wishes to express his gratitude to Lady Pax, who graced the occasion with her presence. He turned to the girl, extending his hand and smiling radiantly. It was an honor for her. The girl simply beamed with happiness. There was no doubt about that. Also, the prince continued to speak, taking advantage of the opportunity, he wants to inform everyone about the matter that concerns the future of Riyan. From today, in line with the changes in the world, the Kingdom of Riyan plans to focus not on livestock farming, which was our main industry, but on manufacturing and trade. People were shocked. They couldn't believe how it was possible to abandon their main industry. Even Karen was confused. Then what will happen to the Pax family, the head of the livestock industry? It seemed like it had become a habit for Karen to bump into someone. And it became common for Paul to run into Karen in inappropriate places. When the girl asked him what he was doing there, the guy replied that he was replacing the chairman of the society, and he had been sitting out in the village all this time, so he was told to greet the sponsors. Karen agreed with a serious expression that this was the way it should be, since research required money. The guy continued that just a minute ago it was so stuffy here that he wanted to run away completely, but it was good that he met Karen. But their conversation hung in the air. There was some awkwardness between them. Paul asked if her student was not His Highness the Prince, which meant the girl next to him would become the crown princess. They looked good together, a truly beautiful couple. Karen didn't know exactly what to say, so she just nodded. The people around were talking too loudly. Of course, they all wanted to discuss the latest news and gossip. But suddenly Paul asked if Karen was thinking about a relationship or marriage. This question greatly surprised the girl. It was clear that she was not very comfortable answering it. She didn't know. She didn't know what to say, and she didn't know because she had never thought about it. Paul already opened his mouth to say at least a word, but Eric's loud voice made him shut up and turn all eyes to him. It was at that moment that he said that from today onwards the Kingdom of Rihian would keep pace with the changing world. They planned to focus not on livestock farming, which was their main industry, but on manufacturing and trade. This was shocking news for absolutely everyone. The prince spoke of this with cold confidence and firmness in his voice, and Lady Pax, with a trembling voice, tried to find out what it all meant. The prince, telling her there was nothing to worry about, continued that the Pax family had made a great contribution to livestock farming, a major industry of the First Order. The royal family, in order to exalt the honor of the Pax family, wishes to declare their possessions a protected development zone. And those who oppose this and try to discredit the honor of the Pax family will be considered traitors. In conclusion, he added that it was his will and the will of Queen Sonetti. The protected development zone means that it will be difficult not only to develop the land there, but also to build other facilities. Who wants to work with Pax if they can become traitors? Someone's laughter attracted the attention of the crowd. The man addressed His Highness, saying that he highly appreciated his vision aimed at the development and future of Rihian. However, if the land is immediately declared a development zone, problems with resource supplies will arise, and this damage will fall entirely on the shoulders of the people. They are worried about the murmuring directed against the royal family, said Marquis Pax. He was right. For the development of production and trade, it is impossible to abandon the primary industry, which is a necessary resource, and the market for this primary industry is monopolized by the Pax family. This is why the Queen had a hard time containing the Pax. But he said that this was the order and will of not only Eric, but also Queen Sonetti. Karen couldn't understand what Eric was thinking. Eric addressed Marquis Pax by name, saying that his heart in caring for Rian was admirable. Therefore, he would like to grant him help. Marquise Bernard and Count Eli decided to support him. People came out, bowed, and answered together that it was an honor for them. Karen definitely didn't like what was happening and what Eric was saying. Charles Eli introduced himself and stated that they would be responsible for supplying resources to aid the royal family and the eastern region on his maternal side of the family. Then Lil Bernard introduced herself and added that she would take on the transportation of these resources, the construction of the railroad, and the management of the factories. And the crowd burst into talk about how Elia's family owned huge real estate in the east, and that they were said to have mountains with magical stones. If a railway is built, there will be no problems with supplies. The Bernard family has long been famous for its honesty. They can be trusted even more than the Pax. Those who share the goals of this new initiative are welcome to contribute and express their opinions, regardless of status or class. Paul turned to Karen and admitted that he didn't quite understand what was going on. But His Highness the Prince had started a new game, whether this was true or not, the young man asked. Karen just didn't understand why she hadn't thought of this before she thought that collaborating with influential families was the best deal. Could it be that her student was saying all this? Eric, smiling like a predator baring his teeth, invited Lady Gina Pax to dance. It was now that she remembered Queen Sonetti's old words that the future ruler must be greedy and cunning, to those who will not miss anything that falls into their hands. Perhaps this is exactly what the Queen meant. True, Eric had no right to choose. Their dance, like the couple itself, was beautiful. But Lady Gina Pax was simply furious. Not only had he not officially announced the engagement, but he had also put her family's status in a precarious position. Eric said that thanks to parties with her, it was easy for him to understand the balance of power in aristocratic society. He didn't dare play with her. Gina was ready to almost strangle him right there with her own hands. But the prince, trying to calm her down, told her not to think that her family was the loser. He said with a sly smile that the girl dragged him around like a doll and had a lot of fun. Gina Pax couldn't take it anymore and yelled at Eric to shut up. She won't just stand there with her hands folded. The glasses of wine shattered on the marble floor with a loud crash and squeal, but one broken one rested peacefully in her hand for several very long seconds. The girl growled that she would not back down so easily and pointed the broken glass at the prince. But Eric didn't even move. Jenny was beside herself with rage and was ready to plunge that broken glass straight into the prince's neck. But the prince maintained the calm of a monk. There was a sense of power in him. Karen was worried about him, either as her student or as someone she cared about. The guards were about to intervene, but Eric, with a simple wave of his hand, made it clear that he had everything under control. The prince walked firmly towards Jaina, closing the distance between them. The girl stood like a doe, watching the actions of the predator. Now it was not an attack, but a defense. Her hands were shaking. The prince addressed her coldly. Such a tone could not help but give her goosebumps. He whispered something into her hand that made her hands tremble even more. If she wanted to protect even the pitiful honor of her family, then she'd better stop. She wanted to answer that she would never back down. But the prince squeezed the glass in his hand and reminded her of the hunting festival. It was clear how angry Eric was. He was ready to break the sides without letting go of it. He asked threateningly what she thought. He didn't know that it was she, and not someone else, who threatened him at the hunting festival. Jenny tried to justify herself by hysterically saying that the threat was not directed at the prince, but at that woman. She let it slip. Maintaining his composure, the prince made a slight gesture to summon his guards. If a girl doesn't want her head hanging in the square, then it would be better for her to disappear from here. Lady Jenny Pax, rumored to be the Crown Prince's betrothal, was sent to prison. His Highness the Crown Prince was rather asked to go with the young man to provide first aid. Jenna Pax's anger and rage knew no bounds. The tiara given to the Crown Princess was called the Red Sun of Rihayan, but she has another name, Tears of Icaros. This meant that it was a position from which one could fall at any moment. Finally, it looks like it's all over. Queen Sonity enjoyed the evening on the veranda, pondering what had just happened. Although she had foreseen it all perfectly well, she thought about her successor, Eric, or rather about his actions. The queen asked about the prince's intentions to destroy one family and gain power, to which the prince replied a firm yes, but this could cause problems. The queen continued to say that what problem could there be if Prince Rihiana was going to do this? Then she asked him what kind of country he saw Rihian as. That evening he replied that in Rihiana, since there is your majesty, who is called a living goddess, it is called a country governed justly and fairly. But Eric believes that this is precisely why Rihian is collapsing, a state that held on and existed only due to its dependence on the queen, not poor but not rich either. Although there was insignificant development, its growth was slower compared to other countries. Like stagnant water that does not flow, it will eventually dry up and rot. Therefore, after Mother leaves the throne, this kingdom will quickly collapse. Queen Sonety asked that the reason for the problem was that she ruled the country. Prince Eric is truly fearless. The woman asked if he really thought that by telling her that he would remain unharmed. But he knew that she and the state needed him, at least for the sake of her peaceful departure from the throne. How impudent and brazen Eric is. She laughed at the person who ordered such a successor to be found. She's starting to get a little too curious about all this. She was also curious about something else concerning Crown Prince Eric. Will he be able to keep in his hands not only power and the state, but also Karen, a cunning, jealous man who will not give up what has once fallen into his predatory hands? Karen returned home completely without physical and mental strength. The ball under Eric's leadership ended well, but something still bothered her. Everyone looked very shocked at the way Jenna Pax acted, and everyone was worried about the safety of their future king. It would be wonderful if Eric wasn't seriously injured. But still, Karen's thoughts were only about one thing. Eric was simply irresistible today, and his composure in an unexpected situation was simply amazing and mesmerizing. I wonder if he will become even more magnificent in the future or lose his power and restraint. He would definitely become a great and wise ruler. Karen was absolutely sure of this and believed in it. Thoughts completely filled with someone imperceptibly grow into something more. They become an unstoppable, free-flowing feeling like the wind. Karen didn't know what exactly to do with her feelings and desires. Finding Eric, the crown prince of the state of Rihian, sitting outside his own door and waiting like a dog was not only unexpected, but unthinkable. Karen, when asked how long ago she had arrived, replied that she had arrived recently and asked in response why he was in such a place at such an hour. To which Eric responded only because he had an unimaginably strong desire to see his teacher. His speeches like these greatly embarrassed the girl and made her face turn scarlet. It looks like Karen is in deep trouble. The long-awaited kiss that Karen tried not to even dream about. All of Eric's tenderness was directed only towards Karen. His touches, words, kisses. But the girl, as usual, pushed him away, saying that it was already late, and if he left without saying anything, others would worry. Suddenly, Eric grimaced and burst into laughter. Karen was afraid that she had touched the very place where the boy was injured. But he smiled and showed his completely healthy hand, saying that he had already healed that scratch with healing magic. Karen was very worried about him, and it was impossible to hide it. Eric asked for forgiveness, but if she constantly avoided him, he would be very offended, so he asked the girl to show him her face. He wants to look at her. Now Karen understood what she had been thinking about for so long. She was not weakening in front of Eric. She was simply weakening when she was next to Eric. She melted in his arms, dissolving in his touches and kisses. Karen can no longer lie to herself that she didn't miss him. Eric admitted that he was interested in something. Who was the man who was with Karen at the ball? Karen replied that it was Paul, her school friend, who now runs a research lab in a foreign land. Jealous Eric asked that this was the man who knew Karen in a way that he did not know her. This question surprised the girl so much that she didn't immediately find what to answer. She laughed at Eric's cute jealousy. The guy got a little angry, because he was jealous because she was Karen. Eric spoke too emotionally about whether she even knows how nervous he has been since he moved to the palace. He could always see Karen nearby before, but now it's even difficult to meet. If he knew that it would be like this, he would have moved to the palace later. Karen laughed even harder and asked if he was really the one who had proposed such a wonderful policy today. He added, hugging her, that he wanted it to always be like this. Karen replied that she was worried that he might later regret the relationship, but Eric didn't understand why he should regret them. The girl is afraid that his feelings are a delusion born out of respect. That's what she thought. But the prince, as if reading her thoughts, suddenly replied that he had never regretted it and never would. Because he, from the very moment they first met, fell deeply in love with Karen. The girl's face flushed at these words. He kissed her forehead with all tenderness and care, wanting to convey through the kiss all his feelings that were hidden inside his soul. Karen wondered if it was always this thrilling and exciting when he said her name. They say the prince did not spend the night at the palace last night, and that at yesterday's ball Jenna Pax injured his hand with a glass goblet, which she waved in a fit of rage. And since he had not yet spent the night at home, the queen was worried that she could not sleep. She asked Karen if this was the same feeling that mothers experience. The countess replied that he had not spent the night at home, without saying anything, which was, of course, incorrect. But still, the queen continued to say he would be the next one to lead Rihian, so whatever he did was none of her business. But she thinks that the princess will definitely not bother him. She thinks that the countess would be a wonderful candidate for princess. But what does Karen think about this? Karen was so embarrassed that she choked and asked why such questions were coming out of the blue. The girl was sure that she knew everything for sure. But the queen only laughed. Eric was informed that the master had finished cutting as he had ordered. The ring for his beloved was finally ready. Karen was very surprised that there was only a month left. Paul replied that yes, as soon as the conference was over, he was going to return to his homeland. It was not good to leave the laboratory for a long time. Karen sadly admitted that it was a pity because she really enjoyed chatting with him. She recalled her university days and how she thanked him for the fun school days. And Paul admitted in response that he was very happy to meet and talk with the girl. He suggested to her that, if she didn't mind, Karen would like to come to his laboratory. The girl replied that she would come as often as she wanted, which made the young man very happy. Why invite her so elaborately? Karen laughed cheerfully and loudly. She just had questions related to the laboratory, and the next vacation would be just right. Paul wanted to say something else, but she was horrified by how much time had passed. She lightly apologized for having to run urgently, and waving her hand and smiling slightly, left him. Paul watched her go, fascinated, wondering who she had such an important meeting with. The servants passing by the royal library suspected nothing. But the girl asked the guy if he had heard any strange sound, to which he replied that he had not. It was strange such sounds which made the girl embarrassed, should not have come from the royal library. But I had to pretend that nothing had happened and return to work. For the girl, this was very embarrassing and somewhat shameful. She asked Eric to stop because they had just almost been caught. But he, as if not paying any attention, just smiled and kissed Karen's hand. She was with another person where he wasn't. Should he be jealous about that? The guy is still worried. But the girl already had to go. If it wasn't an urgent matter, then it would be difficult if he kept calling her that. But Eric replied that there was an urgent matter and it needed to be done very quickly. Karen was not in the best mood again. They say that when you learn to steal late and before you know it, dawn breaks. She never thought that she would have something similar. She thought about when the tunnel would be finished and that she knew there were mana stones in the mountain range that belonged to the Ili. But due to the difficult terrain, there were difficulties with extraction and transportation using only labor. Thinking about building a tunnel in that place was just an impossible dream, she thought, so even as a child. But her student is really very smart. She will also work hard and help Eric in his future endeavors. The girl found a letter on the table and asked when it was delivered, to which the girl replied that it was 2 hours ago. If it's red, it must be an urgent message. A delegation from Adelbar arrived in Port Wellington to congratulate Prince Eric on his change of title from Archduke to Prince, and they are heading to Rien. Below is a list of the members of the delegation, which included the bride, her sister. This made the Countess very angry, and she tried to find out why it was only reported now. And in the port, the sailors failed to hold the cargo, so it fell with a loud crash. But the sweet girl, truly wanting to know if the young people were okay, turned to them. The girl, whom the sailors nicknamed an angel, was called by her name, Carla. The man urged her on, adding that this was Wellington, the largest port city in Rien, but it was still a long carriage ride to the capital of Rien, where they needed to go. The girl was delighted that they had finally reached Rien itself. And Karen took it out on the employee, screaming about why he didn't tell her about this earlier. But they tried to reassure her that since Her Majesty the Queen had not said anything about this, perhaps it was because the matter was not so important. But Karen was simply furious. She thought that now she understood how the Queen felt. She was also irritated by people who tried to solve any problem through her. So that's why Carla is coming to Rien. She should have found out about it earlier. The Countess announced to everyone that a delegation would arrive from Adelbar. They would arrive in the capital from Wellington in a week at the latest, so they needed to hurry. The level of the recent banquet is not suitable. We will welcome them in style, provide additional staff, and make every effort to prepare a welcome banquet. But the workers' question about whether there was a reason to greet the delegation on such a grand scale caught her off guard and made her fall silent. She paused, apologized, admitted that she had made a mistake, and ordered everything to continue as planned. Hearing that Carla was arriving, she, without even noticing it, began to fuss, acting as if she were the ruler of the state of Rien. Compared to Carla, Karen is just a nobody. She had to sacrifice herself for Carla, but nothing has changed in her yet. She's still the same coward. The prince asked again about the delegation from Adelbar. The Queen replied that since he, the former Archduke, had become the next heir to the throne, they would come to congratulate him, and at the same time confirm the alliance with Rien. The prince asked that the Queen then instruct him to organize a banquet in honor of the delegation. But she replied that she would take care of it herself, and asked that she had heard that Eric had recently ordered a ring from a skilled jeweler. She knew it was for Karen, and she was glad for the smart crown princess. Eric replied that he wanted to make an offer soon and announce it officially, to which the Queen replied that he should do as he saw fit and that everything was right. Even if she tried to dissuade him, he would do it his own way. Queen Sonati admitted to herself that she truly had such a wonderful son. If she also becomes attached to him, it will be a real disaster. It's time to slowly prepare for leaving. Karen didn't even notice how Eric was lying on her lap. He asked what she was thinking about. She replied that she just had a lot of work and it wasn't scary, but the prince continued that the girl was a terrible workaholic. When the prince asked her if she thought about him at all, the girl answered with a smile that she always thought about the prince's well-being. Eric heard from Her Majesty yesterday that a delegation from Adelbar would arrive, which is Karen's homeland. To avoid conversation, the Countess said that it was time for her to go, and that it was not good to leave her workplace for a long time. Eric tried to reason with her, calling her by name, but the girl was muttering something under her breath about a mountain of documents on the table. He grabbed her hand tenderly and asked her to calm down. The girl looked truly confused. She was thinking whether or not to say that in this delegation there would be that very younger sister she had told him about. If she tells Eric, maybe she will feel better. She does not want to involve her personal feelings in diplomatic matters. She, trying to hide her worries, asked with a laugh if Eric was worried about her. He said of course, but Karen said she wanted the delegation that had gathered for him to be successful. That's probably why she's a little nervous. But she asked with trepidation and tenderness why she should lie to him. Eric replied that if something happened, she should definitely tell him and they would figure it out together. The prince received another letter. He was informed that she seemed to be very busy preparing to receive the delegation and could approach her again later. Eric didn't like this at all. Whatever one may say, it seems to him that it all started that day. Karen deliberately buried herself in work because she didn't want it to look like she had lied to Eric. A caring person like Eric would definitely notice that something was wrong with her. And it's not just diplomatic issues. She doesn't want to show him her pathetic side. So only until Carla returns. She just needs to hold out until this very moment. Everything will be fine. She will definitely cope. Finally, the day of the delegation's meeting in Riayana arrived. Eric asked with some displeasure how the Countess had lived all this time. But the girl, with feigned cheerfulness, replied that, thanks to his care, she was completely fine. The prince added with a smile that this evening the Countess would have to devote time to him too, and not just to paperwork. He looked at her sharply, kindly, but at the same time, suggestively. But Karen was too nervous all this time. You just have to endure this time steadfastly, and then it will get easier. It was said that the bride of the third prince, Adelbar, was a saint. The man bowed before the prince and thanked him for the warm welcome, showing respect. It was Christian, the third prince of Adelbar, and his bride is Saint Carla, who is honored to meet His Highness Prince Eric. The girl's eyes sparkled, but her gaze was not directed at the prince. She rushed towards Karen to envelop her in a tight sisterly hug. She said excitedly that her mom and dad were very worried about her, while everyone else stood there in bewilderment. The hall was filled with conversations, but the sister still did not stop asking questions about how her sister was doing here, who did not even answer letters. But Karen didn't hear. In her head there were screams that she was ugly, that compared to Carla she looked like a monster, and that Karen should get out of sight. The Countess felt sick and could not utter a word. Eric, he must be disappointed to see her so unable to speak. Besides, they don't look alike at all, even though they are sisters. But suddenly, Eric stood in front of Karen and said that he understood the joy of Carla meeting a family member, but maybe they should postpone the long-awaited reunion for later. Her Majesty the Queen is waiting. As a token of apology, Carla asked if she could grant the prince the blessing of the goddess Hela. She had already taken his hand without waiting for an answer. Her husband called her name in an angry tone, and Karen, indignant and perplexed, asked what this meant. But the prince replied that he was forced to refuse and freed his hand. He replied that there was only one god he believed in and pointed his hand at Karen. It was a gesture that protected Karen from her sister, at least for a while. But as usual, Queen Sonity stole the show. Perhaps that was for the best today. She said with a smile how deep the prince's love for his mother was. She also hopes that Saint Carla will understand everything correctly. The visiting delegation bowed to Queen Sonata, thus showing their deep respect. Christian, in order to at least slightly smooth over the awkward situation, said that Carla did it out of pure motives and asked to forgive her for this insolence. The girl, making an unimaginably sweet face, replied that she just wanted to apologize to His Highness. Eric, keeping his face, replied that everything was fine and invited the guests to come with him. Turning around, he asked the Countess to help him see the guests out. This pulled Karen out of her stupor. As usual, Karen's sister had already tagged along with her, but they still left. Karen thought that all her achievements paled in comparison to the miracle that had appeared for the first time in 100 years. The Countess, feeling very uncomfortable, decided to escape from the tea party while no one was looking. And what should she do now if she got so nervous as soon as she saw Carla? It seemed to her that Eric said the words about the goddess he believed in while looking directly at the girl, although this was impossible. Carla is still beautiful. Her very existence radiates light, and Karen thought of herself as nothing compared to her. Suddenly, someone grabbed her hand and turned her around. It was Eric, who was asking if everything was okay with the girl. But the girl, having called the guy by his title, tried not to show it. He was worried because the girl was very pale. He asked if this was the sister Karen had once told him about. Nodding affirmatively, she apologized for not informing him about this in advance. But the guy didn't answer. He just lightly kissed her on the forehead. He pulled away for a second just to ask if he could kiss the girl, and he added that she seemed very tense. He started showering Karen with compliments, telling her how beautiful, smart, wonderful she was and so on, and then asked if she was feeling better. Yes, thanks to him, thanks to the fact that he is nearby, she felt much better. Karen was pestered with questions about why she didn't tell them her sister was a saint. All the attention and comparisons are directed not at Karen, but at Carla, something the former has become accustomed to over so many years. Compared to Carla, who was innocent and beautiful like a ray of sunshine, Karen didn't look like the most beautiful child in the family, and the people around again admired how beautiful and sweet her sister was. Finally, the Countess could not stand it any longer and said that Carla was here as a member of the delegation from Adelbar, so please let her behave appropriately. Karen decided to act as usual because it was just her job. But Carla managed to attract attention to herself here too, this time even more. The girl began to cry like a little child who had been scolded for bad behavior. Karen simply didn't know how to react, whether to cry or laugh, and immediately people ran up to Carla to console the sweet creature. The girls who calmed the girl claimed that the Countess was simply embarrassed to see her sister after a long separation. But Carla continued to cry and blame herself for everything. She talked about how Karen lived so well in the Great Kingdom. It seemed she was too tactless and only bothered her. She and her parents were so worried that she was alone in a foreign country. Both she and her parents treasure her sister very much. After Karen left Adelbar, Carla missed her so much that she cried every day, and it was so difficult to contact Karen. But suddenly a familiar voice saved Karen from this nightmare. He said that the Countess was very busy with administrative matters and caring for him. It was her lifeline in this situation. If it weren't for Eric, Karen would have definitely lost her composure. He said that when he was left alone in Wellington, she brought him to Ryan and taught him a lot, and it was thanks to her that he was able to come here. It seems like he in this country took Carla's precious sister away from her, so he apologizes, but Carla says that's not what she meant at all. And the people around began to gossip that the Countess was really very busy, and that her wisdom was recognized in the kingdom of Riyan, which is why the queen granted her the royal title. Carla was no longer crying, but instead was smiling broadly and telling her sister how cool she was. But Karen couldn't control herself any longer. She pulled away from her embrace and coldly said that she urgently needed to leave. Even Eric couldn't fully understand what exactly was happening to the girl. He ran after her, just so as not to leave her alone with herself. But Carla stopped him, timidly taking him by the cuff of his shirt. Out of place, she asked the prince if he would like to dance with her. It was awkward to refuse a member of the delegation from Adelbar in front of so many people. She said that she herself didn't even notice, but Eric extended his hand to her and addressed her. The girl was already ready to start dancing while simultaneously saying what an honor it was for her. But Eric pulled his hand back with some disgust and said that he wanted to ask her something first. Why did she, the future crown princess of Adelbara, accompany the delegation? She, laughing merrily, answered, because she is a saint. But Eric, smiling predatorily, said that he had misunderstood her. He was simply mistaken when he saw her at an official event, not in the robes of a saint, but in a dress. The people around them, hearing this, immediately changed their expressions. Instead of charm, contempt appeared on their faces. They began to whisper that the jewels on that dress looked like real ones, and shouldn't a saint have separate vestments? Carla, who was now directly disgraced, could only say that if the prince did not want to dance with her, he could have answered directly. He dryly replied that that was not what he meant, and apologized. It's just that if she was inviting him as a future princess, he wanted to first ask permission from her fiancé, Prince Christian. The girl replied that she was both the crown prince's fiancé and fulfilling her duty as a saint, and asked the prince to be understanding. He apologized and said that if the princess didn't mind, next time he would invite her to dance himself. The girl was charmed by his beauty and manners. He added that, of course, if Prince Christian allowed him to do so, so he asked to enjoy the rest of the time at the party. He raised a toast to the two kingdoms, and everyone quickly took up this toast and joyful shouts were heard everywhere. Karen stood alone, looking into the distance. She received help from Eric again, and now she thought only about it. Suddenly, a painfully familiar male voice called out to her, thereby greatly frightening the girl. She smiled insincerely and said that she was fine, and that she felt embarrassed that she showed him her weak side so often. She asked him if he was disappointed that Karen had tried so hard to appear smart in front of him, but in front of her younger sister she had turned out to be as dumb as a fish. Still, she added that she looked stupid and was no different from her childhood self. She spoke in a choked voice about how Carla was still just as beautiful, but she was still just as awful. And suddenly she started screaming. She feels inferior next to her younger sister. She thought that she had changed at least a little, but nothing has changed. Erich couldn't take it anymore, so he shouted her name so that the girl would finally listen to him. He said that it wasn't so, that the one he knew wasn't terrible. But the girl, crying through her tears, replied that this was not so, and that she was not who Eric thought she was. She apologized to him for disappointing him, but Eric began to speak seriously about how when she left Rian, she told him to believe in her because she chose him. But if now she denies who she was before, then who does he become? The one she chose herself. The guy seriously asked if that Karen was really a different person. He believes in the Karen Prime who came to him in Wellington. He believes in the Karen Prime he has seen so far. Every moment he spent with her was his proof and her proof. So let her not deny that she is amazing. Karen is his love, his only goddess whom he serves. Eric, kneeling before Karen, prayed that she would go through this difficult path with him. Or, he asked, she doesn't want it. But how can Karen refuse him, her prince? She was genuinely happy next to him and he was next to her. But there are extra ears everywhere. Carla told the maids that she wanted to say a prayer, so they should not let anyone in. The girl addressed the sacred goddess Hela in her prayer. She, the saint born under her blessing, prays for her sister, Karen. Bless the sister who has found her love, and may she now live happily in this goddess-blessed Riayana. She prays with all her heart that there will be only happiness in her love. The girl's hands were shaking strongly and noticeably, but she continued to pray for her older sister's happiness. Perhaps the goddess will grant her a similar chance and similar happiness. Karen looked at the box and the ring inside, given to her by Eric, with a fascinated look. She remembered with tenderness and trepidation how he called her his goddess. Karen watched with all her love as her beloved man slept peacefully next to her. But she still doesn't believe her parents, and especially not Carla. If she is his proof, then she will also consider him her proof. She truly felt calm next to him. Suddenly, Eric woke up, and the girl began to apologize for waking him. He didn't answer, but just hugged the girl, holding her tightly to himself, and repeated her name over and over again. Eric asked, even ordered, the girl to stay by his side forever, and Karen, laughing, replied that she would do just that. Carla was choosing hair accessories for the day. The maid said the weather was nice today, so flowers would be perfect. But she, remembering Eric's words, replied that if it was too lush, it would not be very beautiful. Christian entered and asked the princess if she would be having tea with the noble ladies today. She replied that yes, she would, bowing her head before him. He noticed that her outfit today was completely different from what she usually wears. The man added that this outfit is more modest, as befits a saint. Yesterday's outfit had been a bit provocative, and he had heard people whispering about it. The girl, trying to defend herself, replied that she simply put on what her fiancé had prepared for her. He, half-turned, dryly replied that she was the one who would become his wife, so she could make such decisions herself. That's why he said that he doesn't like saints who grew up outside the church during tea. The girl should behave with dignity, as befits Saint Adelbera. The girls discussed Prince Christian, that he was really good, and also very kind to Carla. One of the girls said that yesterday when she crossed paths with him, they had a very good chat. It is a great rarity to meet such a good, kind, and caring spouse. They hope that their prince will also meet a good bride who can become a beautiful queen. The noble ladies discussed Prince Eric's personal life and came to the conclusion that he had never once announced his marriage to anyone, and not even officially. Carla asked again, meaning that Prince Eric had no bride, to which she received a favorable answer. So, what Carla saw last night means that they don't have an official relationship yet, and from now on, she can change anything. Carla apologized and left for a couple of minutes, and suddenly, a terrible realization came to her that, in fact, the goddess seemed to be of the same opinion as she. She thanked the holy goddess and would gratefully accept this gift of opportunity. Karen didn't understand what the queen's official decree was. If this is an official order, then what to do next?